Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going into part 2 of our complete guide on how to respray a motorcycle, and next stage we're going to do is talking about the painting, the base color, the lacquer and the finishing, the polishing parts. I'm not going to be talking about the Lechler paint system we use because you might be using a different one, so I can just advise you that you check to see exactly what your measurements are on your 2-pack hardeners, accelerators, all those kind of things. Just look, see what products you have in the range that you're already using, and I would advise you not to mix between different brands for obvious reasons. You could find yourself in a whole bunch of hell there. So let's dive in and let's get the paint side of this shown to you. Hope you guys find this useful. If you do, please subscribe and of course hit that like button. It keeps me going, and I'll see you on the next video. Right, when we spray base coats, we don't have to use the fanciest gun in the house, okay? A base coat, you could use something quite cheap. The lacquer gun itself has got to be something that is fairly good, I think, if you want to get a decent finish. I have here a thing called Devil Bliss. It's a few £100 worth, but it does a fantastic job of getting the applicator onto the surface. The worst enemy of a good finish is debris, and the worst thing you can do is put the paint straight into the gun. All right, you need something like a filter, something like this. I reuse this, but basically what you do is put that over the head and you pour in your mix, and so you don't get any nozzle blocks, any bits on your surface. You want a mixer and you want a mixing cup. You can go online to the PDF documents and see exactly what the mix ratios are. Some do them in weight and or milliliters. In the case of lacquer, this is the actual lacquer material, which will never dry unless you put the hardener. And then thinners. The reason you mix that in is to actually thin down the lacquer a little bit. You put about 10% in. Thinners does two things. It thins out the paint, and it also evaporates the paint. It dries a little quicker. But again, look at the brand, look at and see what they say on the instructions, and now that's it really. Right, back to reality. We are spraying today, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people asking about what color choice I'm using. Well, we got the color match off an original part of the bike. If you consider the color that would have been on here would have been exposed to sunlight, whereas color that would have been on the inside here would have been a lot purer. And we ordered this BSB Kawas 59 Sunbeam Red. So with any base colors, there is no hardener involved in base colors. Uses a thinner. That is a 60-40 mix. And you're not supposed to spray all the red onto that white surface. If you try and cover it in the first hit, you're going to do two things. One, you're going to risk a chance of running. And secondly, you need to allow the first layer's thinness to dry over about 5 to 10 minutes, just to get that initial amount of thinness to evaporate. If you don't do that, your base coat's going to stay wet for a long time. It'll take a good 6 months if you don't allow the base coat to dry sufficiently. We're talking 5-10 minutes between coats, so it's not a big deal. There we are. Red. And just see a little white spot there. I'll just wait for that to dry, to touch dry, and then I'll flick it off. Then I'm going to give it another coat. We're right in the middle of the final stage of putting on the lacquer now on all the parts of the bike. Remember, this is a wet on wet spray job. This is a dry, wet on dry. We've got about 40 minutes roughly to spray before it starts to gel up and it's going to start causing problems. So I really have to fly through this stuff, make sure that all your parts on the bike, particularly when you're doing lots of pieces, like you can see here, I've got all this to do now. There's a lot of stuff to do here. You make sure that you know where they're going to go, which pieces you're going to pull out of the spray booth to put in the curing booth or the drying booth, just to dry everything off, so that you can keep going, because you really want to get within those 40 minutes. Otherwise, chuck that lacquer away if you're running out of time. Just remix a new batch. We'll wait till Monday morning and then we'll rub those out. That's not an issue. It's quite common to get drips. We've got all the main parts here. Come out really nicely. Exhaust pipes look really good and the frame looks really nice. And those are the bars that you will see on the bike between the side pods, so those need to be very clear because I don't intend on polishing this. Here we have some more bits. That's come out well. Again, I think there's a drip on there, but nothing I can't fix. These side pods, I must say, look amazing. They really look good. You know, you could give yourself 3-4 days safely, and then there's the polishing. So good 5 days of prepping and primering and base coat and lacquering. So give yourself a week if you're going to do it pretty much all day. So we've come back 18 hours later and I'm just pulling all the parts together and see what I've got. But for the Guzzi guys, we have to put a pinstripe onto that. On the tank, we have the top piece to do in black, matte black, and the bottom. There's a line that runs along there. And then there's a pinstripe that runs the same thickness as the side pods. Here you can see this is done, although I'm not sure what this would have left the factory like this, but I'm going to polish this for the client. The headset here, which is black, is traditionally a matte finish, as are the brake, the disc brake mounts. I'll show you how to mix up a matte. Right, I got some 10C to keep me going today because it's going to be another sanding day of getting these bits and pieces done and flattened off. So we're going to start with getting the drips off. You're going to go between 400 and a 600. Be very careful with the 400. You don't want to work on any of the radiuses on the corners. You will go through not only the lacquer layer, but you'll go through the base coat and possibly into the primer. Then you really are back to square one again. So 800, 1200, let it sit overnight. Softens it, makes it more malleable. And always remember to use the block. So let's get cracking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work on a part that's hidden first, just to check and see how this reacts. Very good point. Just don't go on the more important bits. This is 600 I'm using. Yeah, I'm going to stop now. Then I'm going to go to something like 800. You can see the tiny little anomalies there. This might be your first time you spraying. And I think at some point you're going to have to draw a line unless you're willing to have a go and see how far down you can go. Because by the time you polish that, you should be able to get most of that out. It's a tiny little bit of work on the 800 and I've pretty much got rid of it. Okay. There you go. There's some imperfections there, but when you polish out, you won't see those. You know, remember the 400 and 600, they are particularly dangerous to use on a surface like lacquer. So as I said, 600, 800, 400 at a push if you really got a big run, but you've got to be super careful. So let's get on to preparing this surface for the polishing machine. The polishing machine comes in after 3000 grit, right? So we start off at 1200. Do we use a 1200 wet? The next is 2000 grit, so wet and dry. So we use a wet, and then a 3000. Now you'll notice that the 3000 doesn't live in there with this other stuff, because there's fine grit that goes in, and if you contaminate this, your 3000 is so fine it's useless. So make sure that you keep it in a separate clean container, and then you use that only right at the end. So this is a typical 1200 finish. 2000. You can see the difference. So this is all the stuff is hidden mainly. It's just this last end bit here that shows through. To polish, we have two types. We use the 3M product. This is the fast cut. This is the rougher stuff. This is now after 3000. We use a pneumatic. There are some electrical ones out there that are on battery, which are nice and slow. The trick with these is you don't want to heat up the lacquer, because you heat the lacquer up, it starts to melt and it starts to smudge. Use two different sponges for the different kinds. Don't mix them, obviously. And there you go. Let's see what we've got here. So this will show you a few things. It'll show you where, see that dullness there and the dullness here. So a little bit more work to do. But when you get down to it, this 10cc, the album How Dare You, absolutely fantastic. So the state of play is that I'm not happy with the lacquer finish that I've done on these surfaces, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to key this back with 1200, and so it looks a little bit like that, so nice and matte finished. So this is where it gets tricky with spraying. You've got to be patient and accept that these things happen. They happen to the best in the industry. So I'm going to ask Marek, who is our master sprayer here, to show us how he sprays onto the surface. Now he's saying that if the items are keyed properly, he'll be able to spray it in without having to polish it all. So what I've shown you is how to polish should you spray like me. So that'll help you get a very good finish like you can see here. But in the case of doing it properly in one quick hit, I'm going to show you how he does it.
There are many drums.
I remember what happened with 10cc was when they were coming up and they were having these huge hits, it was very groovy to like.
Having seen this documentary, I realised that I shouldn't be embarrassed about it because there's such a great story there. So I do think that documentary did play a key role.
So there we have it. One lip, just a bit of cleaning to do around it. Here you've got to get your masking very consistent. So as you go, you start to shape the turn. So already so you can see there, that's just about bang on. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Visually check that we are pretty much spot on there. So that is the original Guzzi orange. You can see here there's a subtle difference in the what would be traditionally a very orange front to the red. They wanted it very subtle. Okay, you can see it's a little bit more orange, but not enough. I want a very subtle contrast between the two. So I'm going to spray that on and just see. Right, let's see what I've done. Might be a bit too subtle. So now the phase we're going into is the final lacquer. Here it looks almost indistinguishable, but you'll see when you put the lacquer layer on, the colors pop out a little bit more. So then the phase after this is the top end gets matted, these get matted, and this yoke gets matted. So now I've called it the heavy hitters now. Look at your hands. When Marek sprays, this is how much time he spends prepping these parts and setting them up for the spray. So pretty critical. So that's before. See the detail there. That's before. And this is after. See if this cleans off. Wow, look at that. So I'm very reluctant to spray into these things. I'd rather have a little bit of patina. The bike is by no means going to be perfect because I haven't replaced all the parts with new parts. So there's going to be areas where the bike is going to feel newer than other areas. But there's always this lovely balance that you get overall of the entire project where you get a sense of what the bike actually is saying. Things like that, that's just part of the patina of the bike. It's not a particularly big job, I hope. Okay, that's about as good as I want to get it. And just as a reminder of where we came from, that was what we had. So these are the two MotoGuzzi logos now. That was pretty bad. A lot of the black paint was missing. One you can see is definitely older than the other one. I think on the whole, we've got ourselves the graphics back, which is really nice. Right, matte going on now. And what we use is, in this particular case, we use the matte clear coat. And really it's quite simple. It's a 1 to 4 mix medium hardener, and then a 10% or 20% thinners. The more thinners you put in, the more matte the finish gets. And I'm going to put in just a little bit over 1 because it's just a little over, up to 30% thinners. There we are, the matte is dry. You can see a lovely sheen to it. So there you go, matte spraying. That's how you do it.